Hello, welcome back. Yes, today it's all about monsters, the Monster Workshop, where we will create a monster, and we're going to look at a spirit, an evil thing, the Banshee. And I'm taking Shadowdark as the system that I will build for. But Shadowdark is simply Dungeons and Dragons. Let's make that really clear. If you're wondering what it is, that's all it is. It is nothing else other than that. It's just another version of that game. Okay. I have collected all my resources. I'm ready to go. I've got a poll I'm going to put up, so feel free to take part in that poll if you want to. And grab some food, some drink. Make sure you're comfortable, and I will explain how I would go about building a Banshee for Dungeons and Dragons or Shadowdark. Okay, very simple. I don't expect this to take too long, so hold on to your hats. This is going to be a fast ride. Let's get cracking, shall we? Hi, welcome to HowtoRPG. My name is Fred Wheeler, and today I want to talk about tabletop role-playing games, and specifically the new Dungeons and Dragons, which is Shadowdark. It is simply a clone, a melding of basic D&D, AD&D, and 5e. It's taken a lot of that and put it all into one thing and tried to make it so that you can actually understand what the heck you're doing and actually make stuff. And one of those things you can make is you can make a monster, and we're going to do the Banshee. Now, the Banshee, in terms of a monster in Dungeons and Dragons, is right now considered intellectual property by Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro, because they simply took the Irish folklore, which was it's a spirit that warns of death. Sometimes it's evil and sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's just a warning, but it's a female spirit, and you know it presents itself and has some certain aspects to it. One is the wail and the cry, and obviously the horrible sort of apparition that you would get. Those are some of the key elements. Well, Wizards of the Coast has gone and said, okay, well, we're going to make it a female elf. Now we can stamp an IP on it. So I'm not going to bother with their nonsense. I'm simply going to go right back to the Irish folklore. That is the Banshee I'm making for Shadowdark. This is why the core rulebook does not have the Banshee, because it's not an ESRD, and Kelsey was obviously looking at it and thinking, I cannot avoid staying out of court, so I'm not going to do the Banshee. But I'm going to do the Banshee because it's folklore. It's Irish folklore. It goes back to that. You know, it's not an IP. It really isn't. I have started up with a document so that you can sort of see what I'm doing. I'm going to share that document with you in a second. I've got two documents actually. But I guess the first thing I wanted to say is I have removed all of my social media and my email address, so you can't find that stuff anymore on my YouTube channel. And there's a good reason. Bots, hackers, naughty people I don't want to have anything to do with. And they are still plaguing AJ Pickett. So I have removed everything that could potentially cause me problems. So finding me is actually very difficult nowadays. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop a link to my Discord. It is really the only thing I'm going to put in. Things like, you know, if you can find me on other social platforms, network platforms. If you go looking for how to RPG or HowtoDandD, you can find those. Okay, but that I'll put there. This link only lasts 7 days and then it will expire. So yeah, I'm doing that quite deliberately, and that's why you can't find me that easily nowadays. Okay, so let's go over to the document that we need to be looking at. And first question, and I guess I do this a lot of the time. Hello, Fred Huber. Fred Huber is right. The Banshee has usually been a one-trick pony. Hello, Matthew. So what I'm going to do here is hashtag what do you think a Banshee stat block for Shadowdark needs? That is my question to you. Okay. Click, no links. There are not 100%. Yeah. So anyway, let's go over to the document that I have prepared so that you can see what we've got. So this is a project I'm working with AJ Pickett on. He's a little bit busy right now, but we're getting there. Okay, so this is all the monster lore stuff. This is just the questions we'd ask. I'll get back to that later. Here is the stat block. So this is what I've started working on. I've taken aspects of basic D&D, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, first edition. So the first printing of the game, I've taken that and inspiration from there. I've also used Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. I also looked at 3.5 or version 3. I looked at 4E. I looked at 5E, of course, and then I tried to mesh them together and find the things that I thought were the things that needed to stand out and be kept. So that is what I've got here, okay? And that's why you have this here the way it is. And my definition is a white, transparent, ghastly visage of a long-haired female, okay? A spirit whose wail warns of death. Warns of death, or kills, because it could kill you as well, okay? So, don't worry about the special abilities. We'll come back to that. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through how I figured out what to do with the level of the monster, because you'll notice that in 5e the monster level is quite a lot lower. Like, you know, if you look at the Banshee in 5e, I think it's like a challenge rating 3 or 4, the Banshee. It's not a high level monster, and it really should be, because the kind of feature you're giving it, which is that wail, is really strong. Like, you know, challenge rating 4 is not high enough. And one of the reasons why it's not high enough is because clearly that was not the intent in AD&D. When they were looking at the sort of lore and how it would operate, they obviously gauged it differently. And somewhere along the line that got lost. So the Banshee wound up being sort of not as powerful as it really should be. In Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, it's actually got 7 hit dice. And one of the things I've discovered with Shadowdark is however many hit dice the monster has in Advanced Dungeons and Dragons is probably what the monster level should be for Shadowdark. And then after that, then you look at the special abilities, and then you probably take most of your stats from 5e quite often, but not exactly. So that is why it is it is level 7 monster, not challenge rating, because there's no such thing as challenge rating in this game. So now that we've got that, now they are also chaotic and sort of, they can be quite evil. So that's why I've got it as a C for alignment. So we're going to mark that in now as well. Okay, so we've got that stuff there. That's great. And then the simple thing is, in terms of building this, I have a table. So I look at 7, and this tells me, if I look at monster level 7, it tells me exactly where my numbers should be falling for a level 7 monster. So I can have an attack bonus of between 5 and 8. I can have 3 or 4 attacks. Damage should be either an 8 or a 10 sided dice. My hit point range, what sort of my armor class can range all over the place. It's quite wide. Difficulty classes can be quite wide. What sort of treasure you'll find with this monster, normal and fabulous. And then the upper range and the bottom range of the stat modifier. Because we don't use the stat score in Shadowdark, we just use the modifiers. So that gives me a good idea of where we're aiming for, and whether I'm doing something wrong or not. Okay, so now we go to 5e. And really what we do is we just take a lot of the numbers that exist in the stats from 5e and you transfer them straight over to your Shadowdark monster. Okay, so you'll notice that its strength is not a -5. I've made it a -4. Now why is that? It's because level 7 monsters in Shadowdark generally don't have -5s. -4 is about the lowest you'll go. And actually it's quite unusual to see a -5 ever in a stat block for a monster. -4 is about as low as it goes. The actual stat modifier could go as high as a 6, which is very unusual, but it can. 5 is probably the more likely the top end. So that is why I trimmed off the -5 to a -4. So that is our strength. That was easy enough. Our dexterity, dexterity modifier is a 2, and our con modifier is a 0. That is all fine, so we transfer those straight across, and I'll bold those. Con there. Most monsters in Shadowdark do not have a minus stat modifier to their constitution. It's not really the thing to do. And then intelligence, well, it's a +1, and its wisdom is 0, and charisma is 3. So 1, 0, 3. Those are the numbers we have to. So 1 for our intelligence, 0 for our wisdom, and charisma is 3. These aren't the stats and numbers you're going to get off Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, because the stat block isn't built that way, right? They're built very differently. The next thing we need to look at is, how does this thing move around? Now, if you have a look at AD&D, they fly. They can hover. They can, they don't have feet, so they can move around. And the same thing applies to the 5e. Like, it's got a fly ability. So it doesn't really need to do anything but fly. It's not going to be walking. It's just going to fly everywhere. Why would you do anything else? So move, near, fly. So we don't want to make it moving too fast. Double near would be ridiculous. Close wouldn't be too, close is only 5 foot. Near is about anywhere from just over more than 5 foot to 30 foot. And if a double near, that would be, like 60 feet. So that's way too much. So near is close enough to what we need. So that's what we're going to have. The next thing is armor class. The armor class, you just go straight to the armor class of your Banshee in the game. And you'll notice this is a 12, and I've got it as a 13 on this monster stat block, which you were thinking, oh, that's a little bit odd. Doesn't that seem like that's a bit high? Why is it a little bit higher than that? And one of the reasons is its dexterity is a +2. And I think because it is a ghastly apparition, that it should be a little bit more difficult. It hasn't got natural armor class. It's more transparent than most things. So I pushed it up to a 13. 13's not a bad number to have, because a level 7 monster could have an armor class that sits anywhere from a 9 to 18. 13 is fine. It's not a big deal. We'll be all right. So 13, that's the number I've made it. That's just a small change. Now, hit points are determined very easily in Shadowdark. Shadowdark's monsters are based on the idea that they have a D8 for their hit dice. So you take the average, which is 4.5, and you multiply that by your monster level. So you multiply your 4.5 by 7, which is the monster level. So 4.5 multiplied by 7 comes to 31. And then you add your constitution modifier. Now, if you remember, we don't actually have a constitution modifier for our apparition, the Banshee. So 31, we just round down 31.5 to 31. And that's how we get our hit points. So it's got a lot of hit points. So it'll live or last in a battle for a little while before it's no longer functional. That's all right. The next thing, how many attacks? Now, for a level 7 monster, we have between 3 and 4. The problem is with giving this 4 attacks, with its, the way that it operates, it would be devastating, because it also has a life drain ability. Now, the 5e Shadowdark, the 5e Banshee, doesn't have a life drain, but the original AD&D monster did, and it had a whale. So because of that fact, and because those monsters are sort of, it's just a reinterpretation of the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, I didn't want to lose some of the aspects of the Banshee, since it is able to sort of touch you and potentially drain your life. So I wanted to keep that there. So I needed to trim down the amount of attacks that it does. So what I've done is I've gone with 3 attacks, which is Death Touch. Okay, Death Touch. That's what we're calling it. It's a 6-sided. It's a +6 to hit, and that is based off our dexterity, and you just add whatever you want to it. You could just say that it's not really using. I guess you could say it's not really using something like its dexterity. It's probably more a thought monster, being an apparition, right? It's probably using more charisma. So we could actually make this a +5 rather than a +6. Yep, and that would be fine. So I gave it 3 death touches, okay? And the amount of damage I want it to do is I want it to do the bottom end on the table for a level 7 monster. It's an 8 rather than a 10, because we have this life drain effect. And life drain is pretty brutal. Life drain is something that shadows tend to have and wraiths. And so we were embedding that into the Banshee. That's what I've kind of done, because I was looking at that and thinking that kind of fits more in line with that. That makes more sense. So let's go with that one. You do not want a Banshee to touch you. So we could keep it at a +6, or we could go to just a +5. I believe the Banshee in 5e is like it's a +4. It's not a high number. So we could change this if we wanted to and trim it down. I don't want to trim it down too much. I find that monsters with a monster level of, say, whatever they are, going plus or -1 is probably a good idea, because, you know, you want them to have a reasonable chance of hitting their target, right, rather than be missing all the time. They need to be effective, right? So and remember, you know, actually level 7 characters in Shadowdark are quite tough. They're actually not that easy to kill. Easier to kill than in 5e, but they're not that easy to kill. So I went with a 6, but this could be a 5. Okay, so we're going to mark this in yellow for now. So we could come back to that if we wanted to, but the number of attacks is fine. We're in the lower end of damage. We've got our life drain, and we'll go into that, and then we have our wail ability. So it needs to be able to wail like it normally does, like the traditional monster does. So we've got our wail ability. Now, let's go look and have a look at the special abilities for this monster. It is a greater undead. Okay, so immune to morale checks. It doesn't flee. It is not going to be frightened by you. It's the thing that frightens others. Okay, so it's not going to be frightened by you. Only damaged by silver or magical sources. So you need to use a magical spell, or you need to use a magical weapon or a silvered weapon. Those are the things that will harm this creature. It's a high-level monster. It is incorporeal. It probably should function this way. It is incorporeal, so in place of attacks, it can become incorporeal or corporeal. So in other words, I saw this in one of the monsters in Shadowdark, and I'm like, that's exactly what we need, because there's a incorporeal movement aspect to this. But in the AD&D version, it could go from being corporeal to incorporeal. Which is an interesting concept, right? But I found that in Shadowdark there was an aspect of that. What did that ultimately mean? I guess it's really going to be up to the game master to ultimately decide how that works. So I've included incorporeal. Because this is a level 7 monster, I thought that 3 special features was probably enough, but I realized that I needed to have 4, so that's why I've done that. This one here, incorporeal, might be one of those things that we could remove. I believe it goes back to AD&D, okay, rather than going back to the likes of, I mean, the idea being, in place of taking one of your 3 attacks, you can go incorporeal. Then, of course, you could move through a space or somebody or a wall or a door. That's essentially what we're looking at. So yeah, it's an ability to sort of become corporeal and incorporeal is a sort of a trickery aspect to it. Life drain. Life drain, as I said, is very much a thing from Wraith and the Shadow. Now the Wraith is a very high level monster. I think it's level 8, and then the Shadow is actually much lower. And so I've taken that concept. So 1d4 Constitution damage, death if reduced to 0 Constitution. Now you'll notice there's no saving throw. So if you get touched, it's just going to work. And most of the time, you'll find that a lot of monsters in Shadowdark have like a 2-step phase to them. Not always, but quite often they do. This is something that's been removed from 5e, but we're not dealing with 5e. We're dealing with Shadowdark. But not all monsters operate that way. So for example here, the life drain for the Shadow reads like this. Target takes 1 strength damage. At 0 strength, target dies and becomes a Shadow. So it's not doing a lot, but it's also only a level 3 monster. Okay, so that's quite similar. There's no saving throw, you just take the strength damage. I've gone with 1d4. Why is that? Because I was looking at the Wraith. And when I was looking at the Wraith, because it's always a good idea to use existing Shadowdark monsters as a template. And it had this. This is a level 8 monster, the Wraith. And the Banshee is a level 7 monster. So they're very close together. And this is how life drain works. 1d4 con damage. Okay, in other words, you can't regain it. Once you lose it, it's gone. Death if reduced to 0 con. So it is exactly the same wording as the Wraith. And you see the sort of the tamer version would be to have 1 constitution damage. But it's a level 7 monster. So we're going to keep that. So it's much more in line with the Wraith. And then we need to have a wail. So you can either do 3 death touches or you can wail. So living creatures within near range once per day. You make... So near range is about 30 feet from the monster. They make a DC 12 Constitution check or drop to 0 hit points and to 0 hit points and are stabilized. So you're stable, but you're at 0 hit points. You're out of commission, so you're not dying. It's like the whale knocks you out. And then, of course, you've got to regain those hit points, which is a drag. It's actually quite difficult to get hit points back because you need potions, you need spells, or you need to take a rest for 8 hours and eat some food. So that is how I built the whale. It is based very much off the concept of AD&D and 5e. So I did both. I incorporated both. So that is how I've built it. Let's go to chat and see what people have to say. I am open to the idea of reducing the death touch to a +5 rather than it being a 6. I'm open to getting rid of incorporeal. I'm not sold that it has to be that way. But yes, I want it to be as much like the basic AD&D and the Irish folklore as possible. I want it much more like that and less like the 5e version, which is listed as being way too low in terms of power when it actually is a very deadly monster. Yep, that's sort of where my head is at. Okay, so there's a lot of chatter in here. Let's have a look and see what you guys have said. A ghostly harbinger of some event. Yes, exactly. And traditionally foretelling of death. Exactly. Fred Huber's on the right track. Think of limiting it to an undead female elf is bogus. Yes, I know. I always thought it's a nasty little trick that, make a slight adjustment and then you can stamp an IP on it. But that's what Hasbro does. Sometimes linked to specific cursed families, yes. So a family's background story might influence the likelihood of an encounter within a Banshee, absolutely. Yes, can be associated with curses upon a family. It also can be a kind of like a guardian too. Not always. Birds are certainly often involved. Matthew's got here, if it turns corporal, could expose animal features as a form of movement. Withers, hooves, bird claws possibly, can go ethereal and move through walls. That's the whole, going not so much in ethereal but in corporal. Okay, slow flight. I suppose you could say that. We've got to be careful about making something too difficult. Right now, our stat block is quite complicated for a level 7 monster. I am happy to stay where it is or reduce, but not to add any more. Do you know what I mean? We've got to be careful about that. Life drain could steal your hard-earned XP levels. I don't think that's a good idea. I've always found that to be probably one of the worst things. Recently, my group have been had constitution damage from a vampire, which is it's bad enough. That's bad enough. It really is. It really causes a lot of trouble. Which has found gold and killing monsters. Constitution drain sounds great. But the problem is it's not drain, it's damage. And the word damage in Shadowdark means you can't get it back. You need something like wish to be able to return that constitution. I feel like the Banshee should cause fear, and if a target is frightened when life drained, then maybe. So here's the thing. The whale is the frightened aspect. You're frightened so much that you simply pass out. That is why you're stable. You don't get so frightened you run away. You get so frightened you faint. That's kind of what it's doing. So we've got that there. I have a Banshee grab a drowned PC and go through the floor with them. Oh God. One thing about being able to flicker between corporal and corporal, it will only be targeted by magical and magic imbued attacks, yes, when in corporal. It won't matter whether it's corporal or incorporal. That does not change anything. The difference is that in one form it's solid and in another form it's not solid. That's all it does. It's there to allow for movement through walls. Does that make, and doors and other creatures, so it can pass through something. That's what the incorporeal is there for. Honestly, it's not there for anything else. That was never my intention to do anything more than allow it that kind of thing going on. And in AD&D, it seems to line up with that. So what we'll do is I will bring this back to the stat block here, and we're going to keep the incorporeal. This is really in place of attacks becomes incorporeal or corporal when moving through solid. Here we go. Corporal 4 moving through solid material. That's all it's supposed to be trying to do. Okay, it's not trying to turn off its its ability to only be harmed by silver or magical sources. That's not turning that on and off at all. It's whether it's corporal or incorporeal, it's still going to have that going on. So we'll keep the +6. Although I would imagine, I feel like Kelsey would make it a 4 or a 5, but I'm going to make it a +6 because I think that's probably much more in line. I've discovered that once you get to level 7 or 8, player characters, once they're particularly fighters, could wind up with quite high bonuses for hitting something, particularly if they keep rolling the same thing, or really high armor class as well, which is something I've also discovered recently. Some of them have kept rolling the same armor talent, and they just keep stacking it up and up and up and up and up, and it's random, of course, but dice can sometimes just roll exactly the same thing. So that is our stat block. I'll put this up onto Patreon, like I do with everything, and then of course you'll be able to access it from there. Normally in the past, what I've been doing is I've been putting a free version of stuff up onto Patreon at the beginning of the month. I'm not doing that anymore. What I've discovered is nobody is really joining Patreon and paying anything. They're only free members now. So that is a broken system. They're not going from free to paid. They're just picking up the free stuff and that's it. And so there's really no benefit for me to do that. And those people who are still paid members are sort of losing out because it doesn't make any sense. So I've decided the only thing that you get is a free tier on my Patreon is the free Star Wars Adventures, because I can't charge for those, because that's for a system that no longer is licensed. There's no open game license. There's no Creative Commons. Nobody can make money off it, including myself. But everything else that I'm creating and making and working with you on is going to have to go into the paid version. But I've shown you how to make it. And the table that I showed you is still something you can download off my Patreon for free. Like, you can get it if you want it and muck with it. It's completely up to you. It's not a problem. Have no issues with that. I've also, if you'll notice down in the description, you'll find there is a link to a document that I made with AJ Pickett, myself, Mitchell Reed, called the Player's Expansion for Shadowdark RPG. Okay, and this, I'll put a link to this into the chat as well. but it is in the description. And this allows you to pay what you want, and you get 10 classes for Shadowdark and 17 ancestries or species that you could use, right? So you can do whatever you like with that sort of thing. And on top of that, I'm going to do more. So we're going to eventually do a volume of monsters for Shadowdark, and if I can convince AJ, we'll do something for the likes of, 5e, or 2024 or 2025, or whatever the heck they want to call it now. I'm not entirely sure. But right now, I'm working a lot on Shadowdark and the new version of D&D, and we'll be doing that tomorrow, actually. So I'm going to end this poll. I've put in my Patreon if you're interested. I'm going to end this poll. So, question. Would you like to play Shadowdark RPG? Yes, 80%. Undecided, 20%. But nobody said no. But then, of course, if you're here and I've got the word Shadowdark in here, you're probably interested in some degree. Do you know what I mean? I kind of wish the Shadowdark people would release a mass market in addition to Amazon. It's not going to happen because that's not how she wants to do things. It is. She's slowly but surely opening it up to people who will stock it, bookstores and so forth, to support them, and you can still get it off her website. And she just had a Kickstarter recently, so there should be still copies available. But this thing that I made that's on DriveThru RPG with AJ Pickett and Mitchell Reed and Wally DM and my brother David Bailey, you don't have to pay for that. You can just download it. You just put it in custom 0 and just take it. And I think we're gonna do the same thing with the monsters, particularly because I won't have been able to play test all of them significantly, but there won't be any monster art. They will just be the more stripped down version of things. And I'm trying to do a lot of the monsters that aren't in the Shadowdark book, because those are the things people are looking for. So yes, going to support that a lot more in the future. You're going to find that I do a heck lot more design work around that. But yeah, that's it. Go make your own monsters. Go to Patreon, download the link to the table that I use to actually create Shadowdark monsters. It's got really all the tools that you need, and then you just need to pull out a few old books, and away you go. You can get it done. It's easy peasy. It's not as tough and as hard as people might make out. You can get it done, and you'll be fine. Nothing wrong with just making your own stuff, okay? I totally encourage you. So tomorrow when I am live streaming, I'm going to be fixing the 2024 Dungeons and Dragons backgrounds, the custom background. I'm going to once I fix the custom background tomorrow for the D&D 2024 version of the game, you'll be able to go through and fix all of the nonsense and bullshit for all the sample backgrounds that exist for that as well. Okay? And surprisingly, some of the inspiration for doing that, not all of it, actually came from Shadowdark and how Shadowdark approaches backgrounds. Not all of it, but some of it. And I also have to thank my home group, because they have certainly helped me actually figure out a lot of that stuff along the way. It made some interesting suggestions. It's always nice when you have a group that can solve problems when you can't solve them, right? So, Fred Huber, thank you for being here. Matthew, huge thank you for hanging out and chatting and giving in your ideas, or putting your ideas forward, and suggestions and thoughts and comments. I really do appreciate that. Thank you for watching and listening. Huge thank you to the people who took part in the poll. I really do appreciate it. I'm going to be back next week. We're going to make another monster. I think the Umber Hulk is due, right? People want the Umber Hulk, so we're probably going to do the Umber Hulk for Shadowdark. We'll build an Umber Hulk for Shadowdark, okay? It's going to happen. And I'm going to keep doing that for a while. I want to thank all of my patrons who support me on Patreon. I want to thank all the people who have been downloading the players expansion for Shadowdark RPG. I really do appreciate it. I hope more people continue to find it and use it. I want you to use it, and do your best to tell me what needs to be fixed. I'm sure you'll be able to do that. I'll put some videos up and you can tell me, I've tried that out and I didn't like that. Or, yeah, I really like this bit and I didn't like that bit. Whatever it might be, we'll see how it all goes. Anyway, wherever you are in the world, whether it be the morning, the afternoon, or the night, please look after yourself, your family, and your friends. Be nice to your neighbors. And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s.